Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski. And today, as promised, a special guest. How are you today, John?
Hey Jim, I'm doing really good. It's good to see you. I we only got like 3 minutes to visit before we got started today, and
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed by that. I was hoping you'd jump on earlier so we could
Yeah.
we could just catch up like we normally do.
Right on. Yeah, good. You want to introduce us to our guests today?
Yes, we have a special guest with us today, Mike Clarensau. Mike, did I say your last name the right way?
You did, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. My last name's Opalewski, and it gets chopped up multiple times every week, and I wondered
Yeah.
maybe your name gets
Last
chopped
name's
up a little
Wiegand.
bit too.
I've been Wygand, Wiglard, the same problem. Yeah. Wiglard. A fat kid in seventh grade substitute teacher calls him Wiglard. It sticks. You know what I'm saying? So I blame that person. Yeah.
Yeah, so Mike, I looked you up online, which is a beautiful thing. You know, we get to learn about our guests sometimes that way. And what I learned from you online that you're a freelance writer, a college professor, a church leadership consultant, and according to what I saw on the web, you serve as the statistician for the General Council of the Assemblies of God. And Jim ran into you, I think, at a church planting event, I believe it
Yeah.
was, and
Charleston. Yeah.
said, John, we've got to have this guy on the podcast. So, Doctor Mike, we are grateful that you're with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's great to be a part of this with you.
Awesome. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about you. You know, we always
Yeah.
like to get to know our guests a little bit. Maybe how you came to Christ, and what's your little bit of your backdrop, your background in terms of ministry, and what you're up to now. So it's actually a three-parter, but
Yeah.
go for it.
Well, I'm the quintessential church kid. My parents started attending what I consider my home church about 6 months before I was born, and I often tell people Jesus saved me from a life of chasing wild women in the church nursery, and you know, came to Christ at a very early age, grew up in that family that were the pastor's right hand helpers and everything. My dad was almost 40 years secretary treasurer of my home church.
Wow.
And, he was that deacon that was, always there. And so, very much grew up in a church, culture environment. Kansas City area is home, and go Chiefs. And, at an early age, really as a child, began to sense a calling to ministry. My
Mm.
grandfather, immigrant grandfather, was a minister, and he was determined. He felt as though I would follow him in that reality, and ultimately that is what happened. And so I have had the opportunity to serve in various staff roles in churches initially. Then I've been lead pastor of a couple of congregations over the years.
Mm.
And along the way, God has opened other doors and given us opportunities beyond really what we anticipated. So, spent a time in the state office for the Assemblies of God in Kansas as the youth director. Spent some time in the national office. At one point, directing Sunday school and editor in chief of curriculum publications, and at another point as the church health director for the fellowship.
Wow.
Spent seven years as an academic dean for one of our regional schools in Texas, and so really have had an opportunity to do a great many things. And might sound like I just can't keep a job. I don't know,
Yeah.
but we've really been blessed with a lot of unique opportunities. My wife also serving national women's director for the fellowship, and she also led the girls program for a time. And so, God has just opened unique doors. Today we live in the Northwest, and where our sons and all of our grandkids are. And so,
Yes.
really enjoying life that way. As you mentioned, I am serving remotely here as the statistician for the Assemblies of God. I'm also a church consultant, and I teach online for three of our regional schools. So lots of things going on and different opportunities that have been made available to us, and loving every minute of it. And so that's kind of where we're at, and how life has unfolded for us.
I'd ask you about what you do in your free time, but it doesn't sound like you have any at this point. I
Well,
I get a drink of water and start the next class is what it sounds like. That's your free time hobby.
Pretty much free time is grandkids ball games and all the activities of family, and so that's a lot of fun as well. So
Yeah. So as statistician with the Assemblies of God, but I know, your ministry, your effect, your relationships, they go well beyond that. And we get things like from Barna or Lifeway Research or, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I read the Barna stuff and I'm like, I just don't have enough emotional capital to read statistics because it seems like everything that we hear about is bad. Bad news,
mhm.
bad news, bad news. And if it is, we need to hear about it because bad news means there's a correction in our course or a change in our attitude or something. But from your point of view, looking at numbers, how is the church in America doing? Could you give us something we're doing well, maybe just to start off with, just to give me some hope, and then kind of tell me the overall, how are we? What do you see when you look at the numbers?
Well, certainly, I would say there's good news and bad news, and certainly the
Yeah,
bad news we're familiar with. Roughly
yeah,
80% of churches are categorically plateaued or in decline. We're
yeah,
seeing, a lot of settings where the church has been strong, the community roundabout is in decline, and in some of those, maybe less populated areas where we seem to have a lot of churches and no people, those
yeah,
kind of things, are reality in a lot of places, but one area that I would consider good news is watching the church in its recovery from COVID. Watching probably, I think we could make the argument from the numbers that greater intentionality today, a little more laser focus on mission. Maybe over the years, without the challenge of COVID, maybe we might have gotten sidetracked occasionally,
yeah,
or really lost some of that energy, or maybe got too fixated on just who's in the building, and those kind of things. And so really I think we're seeing more, not just intentional community engagement and outreach, but really more laser focus on the spiritual growth of our people. Are we really making a difference? Are people's lives really being impacted? And so I think there's evidence of that as we attempt to recover from the losses that a great many experienced during the COVID situation. And we are seeing that recovery happen
good,
across the board now in churches of all sizes. We still have a ways to go for sure.
yeah,
There are, especially our larger churches, have quite a bit more to regain in order
hmm.
to be back to somewhere similar. But the intentionality is producing result, and we're also seeing in younger generations a higher interest in the church and in the things of
Yeah,
God than we anticipated. I go
yeah,
back 2 years where the doom and the dark and doom and gloom mentality of the next generation, and how there's hardly going to be any young people that have any interest in the
yeah,
church, and that really has not materialized, at least not
yeah,
nearly in dark tones that we anticipated. We're seeing the millennials and Gen Zers stepping into church leadership
yeah,
roles.
yeah.
That's exciting to see, and so there is some good news in there, but certainly there are many challenges, as you
That
know.
that 20% versus 80% plateau or decline. If we were to go back 10 years and then 20 years and 30 years, how has that number changed? Do you know, like, was it used
Yeah,
to be 30-70? Was it 50-50? Was it 90-10?
yeah. You go back about even five, pre-COVID, go back
Yeah.
5 years or so, and you're looking more to 30-70 reality.
Okay.
Part of the reason those numbers are so difficult, obviously the COVID decline, but even when we calculate plateau and decline, we're using a 5-year measurement. So we're
Okay.
comparing, a reality on this side of COVID to what life was on the other. So that, that's
Yeah.
an impact. If you back up 20 years, you're probably getting closer to a 40-60 reality. So
Okay.
we have seen a steady increase in the percentage of plateaued and declining congregations.
Okay. I'm just curious because you hear that and you go, well, is, back in the day, don't lay your baby on their stomach because of
Yeah.
sudden infant death. And then 5 years later, don't lay them on their back. You realize it's like a 49-51. They're
Right.
making these broad pronouncements. So I like it when somebody can tell me what these
Mhm.
numbers mean. So thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
And Mike, you said something that really caught my attention. This intentionality that is helping churches come out and recover. Specifically, one of the areas, and you didn't say the word discipleship,
Mhm.
but I think in a way you did. One of the things that I was the most disappointed about when the pandemic hit was the lack of discipleship, the
Yeah.
lack of maturity. And I thought, wow, man, that is eye-opening, that we have probably failed in a large way to truly disciple people. And I wonder what you think about that, and how you see that trending now, the whole thing of discipleship.
Well, I do think, and I agree with you. I had the same concern. Certainly prior to COVID, felt like many of our discipleship strategies were actually crowd management strategies. That we
Yeah.
were
Mhm.
trying to do
Yeah.
things that we could, if we can't do it with everybody, we don't do it with anybody, kind of reality. And
Yeah.
and so I think part of what maybe driving this, I don't necessarily have data to back this observation up, but I see that, even with the greater use of technology, necessity, many churches that, weren't live streaming or weren't recording and those kind of efforts, high percentage today are, because COVID forced them into that and they've
Yeah.
continued. Well, now they're looking at what they do and making more use of that. I think the settings where we used to do discipleship are not as plenteous as they once were. And so I think doing more with what we have, another factor in that is, really the loss we experienced in large part during COVID was what we might call the fringe of the church, the
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
folks that weren't really deeply engaged. And so,
right.
now that, with things kind of shrinking down, if you will, to more of that essential core, that's allowed us to be a little more focused on, what's really happening there. And
Yeah,
so discipleship has come into view, greater focus. There's, of course, a number of efforts by various denominational groups of some sort of deeper Bible engagement, and, and looking at, how are we teaching? What are we doing? And so, yeah, all of that, whether, maybe it was a perfect storm to help us get discipleship back, center stage a little bit. And we
right.
are
Yeah.
seeing that in a great many places.
Yeah, I remember we did a podcast during the pandemic, and I remember using this phrase with Jim. I said, Jim, I think one of the things the pandemic has done is it's exposed the pretenders, the
Mhm.
rebels, and the coattail riders, and
Yeah.
they have come out.
Yeah.
The pandemic has just separated that, and what's left is going to be easier to pastor in the long run. It's
Mhm.
hard to pastor a consumer. It's hard to
Absolutely.
pastor a rebel. It's hard to pastor a pretender. And I guess that's very encouraging to me in this sense that now what's left is more disciplable in a sense.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope for the future.
But I think also, even on the flip side, not just from the leadership chair, but for the people themselves, their participation in the local church has become more clear. Why do I do this? Now that this is a priority in my life, why? And so I think the level of engagement for those who are part of the church's ministry today is more intentional. So we're being more intentional as leaders; they're being more intentional as participants, and that's certainly going to be nothing but beneficial for the future.
Yeah. So Mike, as you look at the landscape of the church in the United States, and maybe you have a worldview of this too, so I'm open to whatever landscape, parameters you want to use. What are some areas that you see need to change?
Well, we know, and you're right. Worldwide, I'm always surprised at how similar reality is in the worldwide church to some of what we're experiencing in America. I like to perceive it as completely different. They're clicking on all cylinders. Life is wonderful everywhere else. But the more that we engage the worldwide church, the more we're discovering plateau and decline, at similar realities. Certainly there are some front edge excitement in many places and great things happening. But even in the midst of places where we might perceive great revival, we're still seeing, high levels of plateau and decline in the established congregations. And so, you know, I, what we in our research work, what has been very, very clear is the single greatest factor for church health is community engagement. In fact,
Hmm.
in the data work we have done, we find about a 0.97 correlation between community engagement and church health. In other words, every step we take toward community engagement is almost an equivalent step toward a healthier church. And so, how is the church doing that? Certainly, there are a number of things that contribute to church health, but nothing quite like are we asking the right questions? Are we waking up and looking outside our walls? Are we trying to engage our community and engage the people around us? Far and away, that is the number one factor or number one component that we see relative to church health, and that's really where our best efforts need to, our greatest energies need to be aimed in that direction, and that's going to bring the greatest result.
Do you know if that's the chicken or the egg? Is it healthy people reaching out, or is reaching out making people healthy? Any sense of?
Well, I do think it's a self-perpetuating reality, but I think that
Okay.
I would definitely say the chicken is, is the effort to reach out. I've seen many congregations stuck or in decline, and by a renewed emphasis on engaging their community,
Huh.
that behavior has affected their values, has changed their
Yeah.
heart. And so, I did my doctoral dissertation on basically acting your way into new beliefs. The idea of changing values by changing behaviors in the church. And so the more
Hmm.
we see others, engage others, it's not so much that we get different answers, it's we start asking better questions. We really start thinking about why we exist, and what we're really here for. And so that community engagement opens people's eyes to the needs around them, and it really can begin to impact their heart.
Interesting. Interesting. Can you give me a couple, just maybe 3 or 4 or 5 examples of what you mean by community engagement? Is this
Yeah.
Vacation Bible School? Is this starting a group for seekers? Is this a dinner theater, Bible study?
When I'm working with churches, I've worked with several hundred churches over the last decade, and the way I approach this with them is, how can we find what we do well in this congregation and aim it outside? So it can take so many different forms, from taking that Sunday school teacher who's phenomenal and everybody thinks the world of that person, and rather than having them teach inside the church this quarter, setting them up at the basement of the bank building to do a marriage
Yeah.
class for the community, or
Yeah.
it's taking our sweet little ladies who do a wonderful job preparing food for funeral dinners, and
Yeah.
partnering with the local funeral home and ministering, taking our abilities outside our walls in
Yeah.
whatever way we can. And that might be the musicians we've got in our youth group, setting them up at the park. It's some way of
Yeah.
kind of moving away from this idea that to experience our congregation, you've got to show up on our property. And instead,
Right.
how can we get to you? How can we engage people? So it takes, all kinds of forms, all sorts of different ways to get at that. Probably as much variety as there is uniqueness to congregations.
Yeah.
As that,
I
and
love
some can
that
be
though.
organized. I'm sorry, I was
Yeah,
going to say.
I love that you're saying what something you do well, take it
Yeah,
outside. So everybody
yeah,
does. Every church has somebody that can bake or
abs-
somebody that can sing or something. Get it outside the
absolutely.
four wall. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That, and not just as an organized effort, but also raising awareness within the congregation
Yeah.
that, I'm on
100%.
assignment Monday to Saturday, that, I often will say in churches, if Sunday's our biggest day as a local church, we're not a healthy church, because our biggest
Mm.
days should be Monday through Saturday, when we are scattered to dozens, perhaps even hundreds of
Right.
places in our community. Sunday's a chance to gather it all up or rejoice together,
Yeah.
encourage, practice our serving on each other. All of that, it can happen on Sunday, but it's really all about what we do out there. And so we did find in our research that the number 4 component of our contributor to healthy church is that individual sense that people in the church have that they are on assignment, that God
Mm.
has a plan for their lives, not just what we do on Sunday. And so,
Yeah.
if our outreach efforts are simply, well, I'm just waiting on the church to plan something, then we're not yet quite there. It's really
Okay.
something that I wake up and realize, how can I make a difference in my school system, in my neighborhood, or those kind of things.
That's so good. I could spend the rest of our time together just talking about
Right.
that. because
Yeah.
yeah, and that goes for pastors, that goes for the members and the attenders of a church. There is this organized piece to it, and I appreciate that. But I have felt ever since I was a youth pastor a million years ago that if the only community engagement, I didn't use that phrase all those years ago, it was evangelism or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
If the only time we did it was an event planned by the church, we were missing it.
Absolutely.
And that not only were we missing it, we were robbing people of perhaps the thing that brings the most joy in the life of a believer, and that's sharing your story with somebody and watching them come to faith. It doesn't get any better than that. There's nothing, at least in my world, there's nothing more satisfying than that part of my life. And I discovered that as a 17-year-old teenager going to Catholic high school, sharing my faith, and it was so much fun. I did not like school until my senior year when I started sharing my faith with my classmates, and every day was an adventure. And so I just love that perspective that it's not just the organizational piece. It has to become a personal deal. So on my whiteboard in my office, I have a number that this quarter I'm going to talk to 12 people about Jesus. I see I'm that kind of guy. I've got to put it on a whiteboard to remind me to work on it. But I just think that's such an important piece of what you said, Mike. I wanted to push up on it a little bit.
Absolutely. This, we are on assignment, and I think way too many of it, sometimes even in the church, we can get very inward focused, even in the way we think about outreach. And so, we sometimes convey the idea the only place you can serve Jesus is in one of our programs. And, the reality is that serving at church, everybody should do it. It's practice. It's just practice for the real assignment, which is in the community. And so, I like serving at church because the people are nicer, and so, you're able to
sometimes
you're able to help out here or there, and and people smile back at you or whatever. But it's just practice. That if that's the only place I'm serving God, then I am not yet in the place that I think that Jesus really wants for me, because he wants me to, this is a go assignment, not a y'all come assignment. And so that's that's really what we want to target.
So you just mentioned one example of a simple change that has a 0.97 ratio to health.
Mm-hmm.
One thing. So I'm listening as a leader going, we need to make changes. You and I both know, and you taught on this in Charleston, there are 5 reasons why people do not want to change, and only one good reason to change. Could you teach a little bit on that for a few minutes? It was so beneficial to me. I rarely remember things. I took pictures. I've taught it 3 times. I so many times now that it's my information, not yours anymore. I don't even quote you anymore. I'm the brilliant guy in the room now, quoting you. So could you teach us about those 5 P's and the one reason?
Sure. And as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. So, I'm sure, and I know these thoughts came from others as well for me. But, church, we all know that for whatever reason, local churches struggle with change more than most community organizations. Businesses change radically because they're driven by the bottom line. School systems change because they've got test scores. But churches struggle with change. And, in exploring that and working with a lot of churches and trying to help in a change process, strategic planning or whatever, there is something unique about the church that makes change extra hard. It's not just that we think God is old and he likes old stuff, or it's not just the nostalgia of the way we've always done it. The very reason why people are engaged with our congregation, the very reason why they call our church their church, is probably a reason that's getting in the way of change. And, I came across some teaching some time ago that's been very helpful to me in this as well. And you mentioned these 5 things. The 5 primary reasons why people engage a church and call that church their home are reasons that are good in and of themselves, but they get in the way of change. The number one reason, and I'll just run through these real quick. The number one reason is the place. Something has happened in that place that was significant in my life. I had a moment there. I had it, maybe it's the place where I accepted Christ, or it's the place where the wife and I got married, or it's the place where our kids were baptized, or, whatever it is, there's significant things that have happened in my life at that place. And therefore that's my place. And place people get kind of funny. We sometimes as leaders, we talk a little bit about place people, because place people are the people that, quite frankly, don't like you making changes to the place. They're people that maybe, I think on a subconscious level, they want the place to keep looking like the place looked when they had their moment. And so even though we're thrilled that great things happen in people's lives, and that's why they're attached to our church, sometimes that reason doesn't really allow for change. It's a great reason to connect. It's not something that opens the door to change, but that's the number one reason, according to research, why people are connected to our church, because of something that happened in their lives. The second reason is personality. There is a leader in that church that I have connected with. That's my church because that's my pastor. That's my church because my kids love the kids pastor, or, some leader has built this sense of attachment, whether it's personal relationship or even just how I feel when I'm listening to this person speak. It does, that connection's there. The worship leader, maybe, it's people feel connected to some leader, which is fine. We might get a little nervous about that, but I learned a long time ago that on their way to connecting with Jesus, a lot of people are going to connect with me. And that's, as long as I'm leading them in the right path, that's really nothing's broken there. And so, but the problem is when that changes, because now maybe that leader's no longer in that role. And so I like to use the word disoriented a little bit. People come to church and that leader is not leading, and it just feels different. My reason for being a part of this has been compromised. And so I'm trying to figure out life beyond that. Reason number 3 would be a ministry program of the church. That's my church because I'm a part of this Bible study, or that's my church because of my small group, or whatever that might be. That's my church because my kids are in the student ministry program there, and so we're connected there because of a program. And again, that's a good thing. We love it when ministry programs can help close the back door like that. When people can feel that attachment. Again, it's good until it changes. Until, now the church, my Bible study got moved from Tuesday night to Thursday morning, and I can't go because I have to work. Or, now, the church has decided not to do that particular kids program anymore, or something of that nature. Change comes and it messes me up. And again, I have that disoriented feeling. The fourth one on here is the people. That's my church because my friends are there. Again, very good thing. We want our people to build relationships. We know that people want to be where their friends are. And so, when my friends are at church, my participation level increases. I'm more likely to be consistent. I want to be involved because that's my people. And so again, it's a good thing until it changes, until that friend moves across the country, or even harder, until my friend decides to stop attending our church community and start attending another one here in town. Every pastor knows that when you hear somebody is leaving your church, your first 2 questions are, I wonder why, and I wonder who's going with them, because of that sense of people. And so, again, a good reason to connect until change comes. And then the 5th reason is position. That's my church because of what I do there. I'm on the worship team. I'm a small group leader. I help out in the youth ministry. Whatever it is, people begin to build a sense of ownership as they get involved in ministry, and which is, again, a wonderful thing. We're so glad that people feel connected because of their participation. That's a good thing until it changes. Until no longer am I needed in that role. Or maybe I was a deacon and now the bylaws say I have to take a year off, or somehow, what I used to be doing there, I'm not doing anymore. And so, now church, again, it feels different. My reason for being here is no longer a reality. And it doesn't mean that people get up and leave. It's just that now they struggle a bit. Their attachment level is difficult. I tell many pastors that the most disoriented guy in your church is that deacon who is taking a year off because he used to be in the middle of everything, used to be a part of what was happening, and now he's not in those meetings, or he's not, and so he's struggling a little bit to find his place. And so again, these 5 reasons are the dominant reasons why people call your church their church. And the challenge is, while they're all great reasons to be here, none of them allow for change. I mean, frankly, you can't change the place without messing somebody up, or who leads what without messing somebody up, or change the program schedule, or or change who's the positions, what folks are doing. You can't make any adjustments. There's really not a lot left to change in the church, and so that becomes I think an extra reason why change is so hard. And one of the things that we talk with pastors about a lot is there is a 6th reason that does allow for change, and that is purpose. Why are we here? What is it that our local church is here to do? And we make a mistake if we assume everybody in the building knows what that is. Because the reality is that a lot of our folks come to church maybe out of habit, or they come to church out of expectation. Maybe they just enjoy it. I'm not saying they don't, but the why is really not clearly in focus. And so, as a pastor or as a leader at any level in the church, I want to help people. I want to help my place people become purpose people. Because if they're purpose people, they'll allow change. All I have to do is help them connect the dots between how making change will help us be more effective with our purpose. So maybe we talk about change as seeing lives changed, or we talk about investing in the next generation, or talk about loving God, loving people, whatever it is. We need to be articulating that purpose so people can grab hold of it, so that my place people, maybe the day could come that they are now 51% purpose people. I'm not asking them to give up on the place. I just want them to grab purpose a little more tightly. And when that begins to happen throughout the church, well, now we have an environment that can navigate change. Now we're ready, to we simply have to find the right change in order to know how to lead our church forward. People will be less resistant to change. And so, that's part of the change journey. We often talk about the 4 questions that, as a leader, I have to help my people engage. 1, do we know we need change? 2, are we willing to change? I've been with many churches that know they need to, but they're not willing. Right. 3rd one is, do we know how? And then the last one is, once we know how, will we pull the trigger? Will we actually do it? And so, that journey is the journey of change for any congregation, and really helping people become purpose driven is what drives those first 2 questions. It's what brings the yeses, because we're not yet engaging the mission of Christ the way that we need to. We're not seeing the result of what Jesus has put us in this town to accomplish. And so, that's a very quick overview, a very fast through that. But I think this is really a key reason why it's so difficult, and why many pastors will just simply maybe stop trying to pursue change and simply just try to enjoy the relationship leadership that they have within the congregation, and not mess that up, because they don't want to mess up their people by bringing change.
Mike, we're butting up against time. Hopefully you'll join us for another pod, because there's so much more that we want to ask you about. But I think what you shared, I know it was just an overview, but let me just say it's brilliant. It's just a brilliant overview. The way that we've articulated this to some degree is encouraging pastors to tie change to vision and purpose. And if people can see a future that's better than the one they have now, they'll be willing to put up with a little bit of pain to get there. And again, that's not exactly how you said it, but I wanted to just reinforce that purpose piece, because I think when I was a young pastor and I wanted to make change, I didn't understand any of this.
Nope.
And man, I bumped my head. I used to have a full head of hair, and having kids and then lead pastoring did the trick. But just how valuable it is to have this perspective on change. And these are the dynamics that you're dealing with And it gives you, I think it gives you perspective. And I also think it gives you a way to talk about these 5 Ps, right? Let's talk about, place and how, your experience here. And I wrote these down, personality and all of that. I just think it's such a beautiful way of not only looking at change, but all kind of a roadmap in a sense of the conversations that need to happen around it. So I just appreciate you sharing that so much. And I believe that our watchers and listeners are gonna just benefit greatly from the whole conversation. But this last piece is like incredible. It's just so brilliant. Thanks, Mike, for bringing that to us.
Well, and I just want to real quickly affirm, like Jim did a minute ago. These things. I appreciate the affirmation. This is not unique stuff with me. In the life of a church consultant, benefiting from others who do the same kind of work, and down through the years, there have been other voices that speak these same kind of things. And I'm certainly grateful for their help in helping me understand these things for my own effort. The mistake many pastors make is assuming that their congregation is driven today by the same set of values that drives themselves. And so we've got to help people. We've got to help people engage the mission and the purpose. And that really starts with being clear about the need and clear about what it is we believe God has called us to do, and how we engage that. And so purpose is critical to the future.
Beautiful. Jim, wrap us up.
Yeah. So it's funny. You don't find me speechless very often, as all of my report cards will attest to. But every time I hear you talk, Dr. Mike, I just got this thought, sometimes you think you know something, and then you hear somebody use language that makes it so simple, you realize I'm just scratching the surface of it. So thank you for sharing the miles and the bumps along the way with us today. Because you found it, you can show us. We don't have to go looking for it. There are answers, and we're grateful for that. And in the next episode, I know we're going to get into some other stuff too, the DISC assessments and different personalities, our leadership. Can every personality type can be a leader. So I'm really looking forward to the next one as well as you unpack that. But yeah, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, wanted to talk more about this or engage you in some consulting work or something, how would they contact you?
I have a website my wife and I do together called ClarensawCommunications.com. And so that would be the way to go. Email is mike@ClarensawCommunications.com. And so that'd be one way to connect that way. And I'd love to. I work with churches and talk to pastors all the time, almost every day. And so if there's a way we can be beneficial to somebody, we're certainly glad to engage that.
And the spelling will be on the title of this podcast. So everybody will know how to spell
it. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put
as long as we spell it right. As long as we spell it right, we're in good shape. So God bless you, our watchers and listeners. As always, John and I and the whole Converge team are here to help you any way that we can. And we're, as we just displayed, we're learning all the time. Better ways to serve, better ways to help, better questions to ask. And we'd love to be a part of your journey. So convergecoach.com, and you'll see the Connect tab. Just press it. 30 minutes with one of the team members to talk about what you're going through, things you have dreams about, things you're wrestling with. If we can't help you, we know somebody probably who can by now. We know a lot of good people that we really trust. And so you don't have to go looking. We've already found them, and they reciprocate that relationship with us. So we love you guys. We're praying for you. It's Tuesday and you haven't quit, which means something good's happening in your life. Jesus is Lord, and keep going as you continue to lead from alignment.